is like super duper duper more intimate in a way to hide my face to record. I talk differently. So we're trying something different during this session. I am recording video and audio separately. We are going to have to pause, however, because I have a meeting at 11. But how do we like the new setup? It's so nice, right? Oh my gosh, I needed a change, the feng shui. And let's see, what is new with me? This is January 30th, 2025. So I've realized this is like super duper more intimate in a way to hide my face to record. I talk differently. So we're trying something different during this session. I am recording video and audio separately. We are going to have to pause, however, because I have a meeting at 11, but how do we like the new setup? It's so nice, right? Oh my gosh, I needed a change, the feng shui. And let's see, what is new with me? This is January 30th, 2025, season 3, episode 5 of Year of the Projects, Cozy's Casts, and we are picking back up the thread of regular rolling updates where I record about a week out of you receiving the recording in sequential chronological format. Of course, we're picking up the thread but changing the length. So the model has returned to the production schedule, but rather than a week out, we are now a month out, and that is giving me some peace of mind and some wiggle room for the veracities of life. I definitely didn't pronounce that correctly. How are things? Things are pretty good. The new production process is interesting. I broke my bone conducting headphones, which was really sad. I love my bone conducting headphones. They are orange and like $40 and just amazing. I got them off Amazon though, so like I don't want to support Amazon right now. But luckily I have these other spare headphones, the little red in-ear buds, and I don't usually like in-ear buds. They're not good for your inner ear, and we all have enough tinnitus as it is. So ultimately I'm gonna reacquire those bone conducting headphones. Please don't send me any. I will sort that out on my own. But unless you're my mom is exempt, she can send me stuff. But for now, we're going to use the little red headphones. And I got them at this tiny store where I also got the tripod, so it feels It feels like full of omens to me. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about dyslexia and error, human error, especially in word, like in spoken word and written word, speech impediments, Freudian slips, what else? Yeah, and then like I have been trying to comment on stuff, and my favorite thing to do, as you all know, I'm like fucking bullet fingers over here. I love to just text, like on a phone, and send without edits. It's my favorite thing in the world. It's just like a fucking send it sort of vibe. It's great. I'm a burst texter. And my mistakes are usually entertaining. And I think we've all noticed this at this point with AI. Like, you can tell the mistakes of AI, or you can tell them like by the type of mistake that writing is being made, whether it's more likely to be AI or a human, and that continues to like, there's a variety. I don't want to talk about AI too much. It's just very relevant right now. But yeah, I have been thinking about like making edits for legibility. I've been thinking about ChatSpeak and how intense the pushback from ChatSpeak was. At the time it was like really being developed, people were being like grammar Nazis about it, and then we went through this additional revelation of like, no, as we continued talking to each other, we went through this additional revelation of like, language understanding when communicating is like, try to communicate for clarity for the sake of second language learners and people with disabilities, and that's just like the way we talk now, right? Like, that's the whole, we all agreed that we're going to do better at this, and so I battle that kind of collective consensus on how to communicate all the time when I think about mistakes and like the like bullet method of my communication where I just like bleh, and then go, and we just leave the error in, because I think human error is important, but it's a really vulnerable way to communicate, and obviously I have to navigate it in a dynamic and like consistently alive and engaged way, hopefully. So there's a lot that goes into that, a lot of thought and feeling stuff that goes into that. Oh yeah, but I've been thinking about mistakes because I typed out just like the biggest critique of this author in the comments section of like a video from one of my favorite authors, and I have been thinking a lot about this battle for me with communicating in a way that can be best understood, but also in a way that like is true to who I am as a person, and trying to like how do we continue to hold space for that living thing when that living thing changes all the time. Most modalities for like content generation and sharing to do it at a consistent rate involve a certain amount of separation from your humanity, a little bit more mechanism, a bit more mechanisticisms, and I'm intentionally not doing that because I think that the like living embodied impact on human beings of the internet is like widely unexplored for the positive aspects of it and deeply damaging for the like negative aspects of it, and we need to tease out that nuance together, and I'm willing to like talk into that space. But I have like a lot of other things I also want to say, and I don't want to cloud my different messages with one another. I took a really, really good recording the other day, and it was fucking muted because of the ways that I've been playing around with the process and like trying to squeeze out time. Like, more microseconds that I can just like have back in my life. But trying to figure out a way that I can make sure that it's a really flexible process, that it can be moderated for a lot of different circumstances or environments that I might find myself in, because the ultimate idea, again, is to, I'm going to just go back to this young adult novel by Scott Westerfeld, but in the Extras novel, there's this flying camera thing that just follows the girl around, and like, she's not the only one. Everybody's lives are that highly observed. And so there's this like panopticon, particle observation, dynamism, creative genesis processes coming from like that dark space in between the things that we can see, right? All of that is going on at all times. And so I'm really frustrated about that muted episode, because in it I gave a really good disambiguation of the right to repair movement, and I talked about John Deere, and I talked about tractors, and I talked about farmers, and I talked about the impact on like GMOs and the relationships there, and I talked about all these documentaries that I've watched. I've talked about it was a good show. It was a really good show, and I'm really mad. I'm mad. I sat here for 2 hours talking to myself about the right to repair movement and how inspiring it is, and why it's so important, and why more people need to get behind it, like, as soon as possible, and how unlikely that is when the main social movements in topic right now are, like, the most immediately pressing on the most vulnerable bodies, which is fair. Like, it should be. It's just the fact that we don't have space for all of it, and, like, if we front-loaded right to repair and a certain amount of autonomous possession of our communication tools in a way that ensured we were empowered to use them, like, appropriately as thinking creatures, I would feel a lot better about our chances with everything else. And I'm kind of glad it was muted, like, I go back and forth. I'm like, which part right now today is important for you to hear? I said this crazy rant the other day about blue sky, and I was like, people don't need to hear this right now. I basically just called, like, my friends and family idiots for going to blue sky, and then everybody's fucking on blue sky, so, like, what did I do there, right? Like, how did I help anybody with that? And I didn't want to come across as calling somebody an idiot, but usually the dynamic between technically literate people and technically less literate people is a very deeply fraught and deeply unequal power dynamic. And so when you know that almost anything you say with knowledge is going to come off as condescending or cruel or in any way damaging, you really just don't want to say it. And so it's always been my struggle with being like a good boy. So bad. But like, as a woman in a male-dominated field for most of my life, no. How do you talk about these topics without being tiresome and without activating a bunch of stressed out mental networks that people just like are already up here with, right? Like, I don't want to stress people out. I don't want to stress people. I want to de-stress people. I want to help them de-stress. I want to reassure them that, like, there's more good than bad, that I'm, like, checking all the math, and there are some really good indications, and I want them to know that, but I can't tell people things that I know in specifics for obvious reasons. Not all the time anyway, and then when I do know something in a specific, it's not always easy to frame or address, because I realize I have to explain all this foundational stuff. And so I'm trying to approach this in a way that does, like, capture foundational things at the same time, and I'm hoping to hit a certain level of general literacy in a way that can't be ignored. Because I think one of the biggest things that I have not seen in the world in this conversation about our future is a whole lot of positivism. Now, like, I know that there are solar punks out there, and I have seen the positive influence in our media and our culture. I see the hope. Like, I see so much hope, and it's amazing. But nobody's like saying why they're hopeful, because usually that's the part you keep to yourself. Like, it's a very, I almost want to call it like a human superstition, but it's also just sort of like a bad call to explain what's making you hopeful in a way that like can be understood, because it could then be attacked, right? Like, or undermined, or the movement could collapse. Kind of like what I was talking about with food culture. Like, if you overexpose something to too much attention, it can just disappear. And of course, when we're talking about spectrums of infinity and like quantum psychology and the quantum level of thought and how quickly thoughts can disappear, it's a delicate universe out there, y'all. And the amount of trauma that we all have and have experienced just by being this level of developed as a species, as a thinking, like, trying to be moral, just, ethical, like working towards having values, having shared values, having shared goals, sharing space, sharing food, culture, love, right? Like, love-based marriages are still so new, and child marriages still exist in the world. Like, we are embarrassingly young as a species, and like it's such a delicate time in our lives. I swear to God, if we just all knew how to lovingly care for teenage girls, this wouldn't be as hard. It just wouldn't. It takes a lot of delicacy. Like, it takes so much thoughtful care. And yeah, things do disappear really quick, especially thoughts. And that's why humans believe in ghosts. They're like, I know things, when observed or given too much attention, will completely disappear. Which means, therefore, there are things outside of my attentional sphere which are currently existing. That's the horror and the fear in the weeping angels in Doctor Who. You know, like, it's all that shit you can't fucking see that's so goddamn scary. And that's literally a survival instinct. Like, yeah, that makes sense. That's like what makes us curious about the world. It's what makes us invested in investigating. It's what makes us inherent scientists as like an evolutionary impulse towards like self-preservation. It's normal. Like, that's so in the cellular biology of us to be curious scientists. Like, naive scientists maybe, like, we add method and rigor and these different layers of process in the different sciences to each their need for the purpose of reproducibility and having some kind of empirical, objective, observable reality to which to give our attention in order to continue exploring and expanding this, like, broader awareness of existence. And we literally are just doing it because we think this place is cool, we think existing is cool, we enjoy the experience of feeling and being, as a person. We want more time to build relationships with other species. Like, the types of relationships people have interspecially, and not in a weird way, are so cool. Like, I remember my first sea monkeys, you know, like, this is a precious, beautiful experience, and we all want to have the time to savor it, and we deserve to take the time to savor it, especially if we want to begin to reverse the damage we've done to our own environment and care for the future of our species on this earth in a way that's meaningful and sustainable. And we can do that. We can do that within our lifetimes. But it's deeply tied to social justice because it has to be. We have to understand our collective power in order to collectively live in the same spaceship rock of this earth. And the thing that grieves me most is that, like, my biggest ops, like, the people who disagree the most with this philosophy are the ones who are, like, they're the ones who have this idea fully embedded in their like mind and in their heart that humanity's animalistic nature is just demon, like werewolf, pure evil, beastly, right? They've been convinced that our natural impulses are always going to be evil ones. There's no possible positive natural impulse. That's such a damaging viewpoint. That's such a painful way to view the world. to think that there is no natural, like, evolutionary impulse in the human psyche, in the human body, in the human genome that is loving or caregiving or positive, like, or that those things are coded to a specific biological sex. And again, in extremes on a spectrum where intersex people exist, but like, that is such a harmful way to view the world. And they're hurt individuals. People, like, they are psychologically damaged. They are mentally ill people, right? And this whole, like, the mentally ill white shooter apologist thing is a narrative to distract us from the solution to that type of illness. Like, yeah. I mean, we should definitely address the psychological illnesses we're all suffering. I'm just fully convinced that a significant amount of them are socially constructed. Socio-politically constructed for the purpose of economic and military might, and we gotta stop. I'm gonna, yeah, so these are starting to hurt, no matter how good the song. Okay. Well, this has been an interesting way to record. I guess we'll see going forward how things go. I'm really excited I'm just excited. It feels somewhat insensitive to be this excited, but I think it's nice to have an outlet for communicating my perspective in a way that feels validating to my existence and my experience in the world as a person. Oh yeah, error. Yeah, so I made this, like, ridiculous comment, just, like, shit talking Neil Gaiman and his wife Amanda Palmer, and it was pretty shitty, but also it wasn't like shit talking so much as it was what I thought were genuine critiques of the circumstance or the situation. I just can't, like, hate either of them for the impact and influence they had on the people that they influenced and impacted. I love the people who love them. And so I feel shitty shit talking, right? Like, I feel like they had more of a good impact than bad for the most part. I really don't like how turfy Amanda Palmer got, and or always was, and I just didn't notice. So that was depressing. But you know, maybe she's changed. It was a pretty low on the radar, long time ago sort of thing. So that's another reason why I'm just like, well, now I feel bad for shit talking. But at the same time, like, I feel like my critiques were super valid in the sense that his work is like, well, I mean, I really just think he's added so much to the world of writing and the dialogues going on in the world of writing that I just can't. Yeah, I feel bad for shit talking. Really, that's it. I'm sorry. I hate shit talking. Even if I was right about most of what I said. Sorry, not sorry. Kind of sorry. Yeah, it is a sorry, not sorry, kind of sorry. But like, come on, man. Like, I really, and honestly, like, that's the thing. That's the thing. Is just this. He just did the exact thing that would work. Yeah, I'm not making sense. We're gonna pause. I'll come back.
This cat loves getting slapped.
Okay.
You are a dog.
So.
Meow.
Yeah, didn't mean. Used to be shit talking y'all game in my bad. In a written verse kind of way. Actually, this is. People may think I'm like excessively apologetic on these things. Like, I'm always deeply unwilling to just like not give criticism, even if it's deserved. Like, I could have couched the shit talking that I did in a criticism style of writing in a way that gave weight to it, but instead I gave it a lot of errors and a lot of bullshit. And of course, that was kind of intentionally, right? Like, undermining the authority of the source, the commenter, me. Because I don't want people to take my shit talking seriously. It's fucking shit talk. Don't take it seriously, right? You know, I mean, the turf critique is a valid critique. It's a very valid thing, and it's valid for its own reasons. All you should have to do is mention it. It shouldn't matter which way it gets framed to you for it to still be like a valid critique. That's a moral values thing, and that's a personal but shared belief system sort of thing. So, yeah, but still, not a huge fan of shit talking. And when I think about everything within the terms or the framework, of a literacy campaign, like an educational literacy campaign, and I'm being very literal, but when you think about literally any topic and like the average person, like all the human beings in the world, right? Like the average person's understanding or ability to articulate with nuance and like should know, what they think and how they feel, despite which way it's framed to them. But framing is a super manipulative thing. It takes a lot of sophistication, and we continue to improve our sophistication. Everybody knows that, we understand the level of psychology that goes into marketing, right? We know that. Thanks, commerce-centric America, for that one. But yeah, literally all of our laws are based on commerce and property. That is what we do. We do trade. Trade is us. We took over for the Dutch. I'm sorry. We just did. That's all we do. That's all we do is trade and wave flags and have really beautiful parks and outdoor recreation stuff and great entertainment and really awesome people. I like the people who live in America. But my point, most of them, my point though about topics and framing and rating and honest critiques and once you start framing everything as a literacy campaign, I don't know about you, but in my process of creating my own moral compass and philosophy and all that stuff, a huge aspect of that is where's everybody else, right? This problem of evil exists inside of us. We are human. We have the ability for evil. We have the capacity for evil. So that's something we contend with in here. And we contend with it also externally. We can see examples of evil and point to them and use them as, the trolley problem and whatever. But when you start framing everything as an educational literacy campaign and just treating it that way in a pragmatic, practical, applied research sort of sense, it's really actionable really quickly. You're we could update everybody. People can read. So many people can read. The amount of people who can read in their own language, in any language, is so high. We could do it. Literacy campaign literally means can you understand, can you take in information and understand it and then apply it in your life and in the world. That's all literacy campaign means. So when you start thinking about digital literacy, technical literacy, there are so many different types of literacy. I really want to see sex ed literacy, right? I want to see disease prevention literacy. Ooh, disease prevention. Ooh, good stuff right there. I want to see safe drug use literacy. Yes, let's talk about drugs and alcohol and how they affect people and why and under what circumstances. All these things, please. That's effective stuff. I've been thinking a lot too. Let's see, there's this other thing I was thinking a lot about, and the other thing I was thinking a lot about was I have said multiple times that the use of punitive measures doesn't train behavior, retrain behavior. You can't call it a rehabilitation facility when it's a punitive, punishing experience. Punishment doesn't train good behavior. It doesn't help encourage good behavior. And I've reiterated this. I've underlined how scientifically well documented this is, how empirically evident this is. There's a lot of different examples of why this is true, but I've been thinking a lot recently about if that's the case, then what do punitive measures train, right? Because they do train things. If they don't train behavior, then what do they train? Fear of authority, maybe? System dominance orientation, possibly? But I don't know. I've been thinking maybe maybe it trains like autonomy or independence or I think there are other ways to train autonomy and independence. I'm not saying it's the only way, but just looking at I'm trying to find a silver lining here, because there's always a silver lining. You just have to find them. I have a friend who thinks this, a friend who believes this, and I have never seen them be wrong about anything. So, there has to be some kind of silver lining in the American prison industrial complex, I guess. But no, not that. But the format of the underlying philosophical framework of our judicial branch, which has been on my mind due to the fact that so many of these executive orders are being blocked thanks to the judicial branch, right? This entire government is designed to serve like checks and balances, and we're trying to teach you really quickly about this framework, if you don't already know it. But silver lining, let's see here. Right. So, judicial philosophy, underlying philosophy of the prison punitive judicial aspect of our justice system. Justice being a very hotly contested, hotly defined word. Sometimes I feel like America is just like the experimental pot that all the other countries throw their ideas into. But that's just the experience of melting in it. Always fun. But what is, there's some underlying stuff here. And I've been thinking about this too, because I've been thinking about how grateful I am that debtor's prison is no longer in vogue. I'm personally grateful for this. I'm sure there are plenty of people who would love to see a resurgence of that, especially in relation to billionaires. Because it certainly exists within the framework of Americans, the philosophy underpinning our legal and justice system, to make a case against billionaires from you owe your country a lot of money in a debtor's prison sort of way. But we can talk about that at a different time. I'm sure there will be time to discuss that. But for now, I've just sort of been thinking about what could be the positive impact on the average American citizen, right, of a judicial system that includes imprisonment, and imprisonment for the specific things that American systems imprison over. It's curious. It's a curio of our inherited philosophies from around the world. And what could the silver lining be for the average person? Because I'm thinking about my own lived personal experience as a child of the 90s, growing up in America, thinking about prison, right? That's all I'm basing this on, is my own single human life embodied experience of perceptions of the prison system from my perspective and bias. So you know what all that is. But thinking about this threat of imprisonment, like we are going to curtail your freedoms in response to your breaking of the social contract. In its largest, most zoomed out version, is a very rational, like universal response to breaking social contracts, right? Like we curtail your freedom for that. We're like, hey, get in the pit. Get in the hole. I guess pit has a different meaning now, and so does hole. But this is a very time-honored tradition of locking away our miscreants. But usually we try to like re-employ them in some manner, like re-engage them in some way, which is the whole reason we tell ourselves it's a rehabilitation process. And I think we have been teasing out this nuance of like, is a punitive thing, like what is rehabilitation, right? Is it putting somebody in prison and telling them no bad dog, right? Like what is no bad dog? Ooh, yeah, I've been thinking about dogs a lot too. I've been watching The Gentleman on Netflix. Wow. And there was just this part in it where the hot weed drug princess was like, yeah, we trained the dog that lives in the man or something like that, and I was just like, isn't that a phrase? Wow. Yeah, just thinking about the close relationship that dogs and men have had throughout um, all of living history. It's an interesting way to put that, especially considering that we tame wolves into dogs. So it's like you're trading the man inside the man inside the man inside the man. At the end of the day, right? It's like drilled all the way down. Or what's going on? Like what is this? I don't know. Human relationships, like just humans' perceptions of their relationships with dogs is so touchy right now. I do blame over the experimental Tumblr girls. A little bit. A little bit. Interesting. Yeah. Nope. Yeah. That was a wrong move, fam. Fam as in all of humanity. Terrible call. Don't get that close with your animals. None of us can even see that. We all saw that. We have been on the same internet. Sucks. It really sucks. Sometimes we're all just here together knowing things about each other. Real awful. Real bad. Yeah. I mean, bestiality is not okay. I know I have entertained arguments on this topic before. I would prefer not to have to. I really would prefer not to have to do this. But it has come up, in conversation, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm really positive. After Clerks 2 came out, I am positive I am not the only one who has had the discussion of the morality of bestiality debate, which I really hope we can move beyond having this discussion, but I think
At the
it's
level
actually
we're having
probably
it, at
going to keep
least.
getting more nuanced as we continue to encounter more versions of consciousness, and as our understanding of consciousness continues to evolve, and as our consciousness continues to evolve. And I think the people who do a lot of speculative evolution work, whether you're in biology or like writing fantasy, already know that, and it's being expressed in a variety of very useful, productive ways throughout our species. But I think like the general public needs to have an awareness and a conversation and understanding that this is going to be an ongoing topic, and it's going to be uncomfortable and at times unbearable. Yeah, the fact that I have had to have that conversation before, right? Like, I think one of the most compelling arguments for bestiality that I've ever heard is, you don't want to hear, this is awful. But the only one that I have heard that was at all compelling was nonverbal consent being a thing that exists. And I was just like, it doesn't change the like disproportionate level of capacity for consent that is involved in that particular partnership or dynamic. And that is a huge factor, right? Like, that's an important factor. That's a distinction in pedophilia as well. I can't believe I have to say all these words. This is why I have to wear all of this protective gear, okay? This is PPE, all right? But that question of nonverbal communication was the most compelling aspect of these arguments. Nonverbal communication is well understood in our embodied experience of being people, right? I was reminded recently that there's a difference between like noticing someone's embodied expression of their internal experience versus listening to their verbalized expression of their will or description of their experience, and how one of them is like, okay, I think I know what I'm seeing, but we're going to go with your verbalized, like, you should call it something really cool, like the expression of their will or something. And I was like, whoa, that's a great way to put that. But it was such an important nuance. In thinking about nonverbal communication and at what times to take that kind of cue versus what times to take a verbal cue. That's a huge component to anyone who dabbles in non-consensual play, especially in the kink community, hopefully consensual, non-consensual, right? Like, we want overall consent, we still want like safe words or the philosophy of safe words built into the play. But yeah, there's so much interplay and like latitude for fun sex stuff when you get this nuanced on like what is acceptable stuff and what is not acceptable stuff, right? So it is important to have conversations about the types of things and that we take as like a larger whole, a larger picture of what consent looks like. We do have different components that go into consent and giving consent and continuous consent, right? Revoked consent is a real thing. And it's fine. Like, just be like, never mind. I'm done. I changed my mind. Okay, I make it sound easy. It's quite hard. I had to practice it with masturbating, right? Like, just giving up more than I really wanted to a lot of the time. I could have powered through. I could have gotten an orgasm out of that, but like, just it, right? Like the orgasm isn't the point. Why would the orgasm be the point? Who's making the orgasm the point? Who's making that the point? And whose orgasm is it? That's the point, right? Like this is depressingly low standard for women's sexual joy. But yeah, oh, well, yeah. This has been a weird recording day. There's not even any lo-fi. I don't even know. I'm gonna slap this together and call it a thing, or I'm gonna just destructive biscuit or something. Yeah. Who's to say? Who knows what the plan is now? We're off script. We're off book. We're going wildly out of control. I know that's true. If you've been with me over the last year or the last 5 years, or the last 10 years, you would know that I am constantly saying that everything is wildly spinning out of control because I have a really high standard for what being control is. And some people would argue too high of a standard for what being control is. And they think that I should go with the control freak. But to them, I say you're wrong, and I can control the entire world with my mind if I try hard enough. Totally true. Absolute facts right there, my friends. Let's see, how else are the things in these last few moments of our time together? The sun has been out quite a lot. That's been nice. Always on this further implications for climate change, but pretty excited even so. Let's see. I see a lot of really great mutual aid projects taking off all over the country, which are nice to see. Big rise in big braindom. That's been great. Love that. Everybody's going whoa with their brains lately, and that's just awesome. So in a lot of ways, it's been not awesome and experientially overwhelming, but I do see a lot of energy, and vigor in the folks, and that's nice. It's always nice to see vigor in the folks. What else? Been watching movies, did I tell you that? Probably been. I've been watching a lot of shows. The food situation continues to just be phenomenal. Cannot stress enough how stoked I am about the liveliness of my kitchen. It is everything I ever wanted my kitchen to be. It is a bright point in my day and just like a warm space in my house. It's just good. It's just nice. And it's nice because it has so much versatility. And I know I talked about this before and how hard I worked on making it possible to recreate any possible craving in my own kitchen within a reasonable amount of time, or because I had intentionally determined an unreasonable amount of time was the acceptable frequency for this meal, right? Like I put so much thought into the way that my kitchen works, and I'm like really, 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 really stoked about it. It is a huge accomplishment for me, especially considering my challenges with food in the past, and I'm just like really glowing about it. Yesterday I just whipped up some chocolate croissants, and they weren't really chocolate croissants. They were just pastry dough with chocolate chips put in them and baked. But it was still chocolate and bread, and it was great. And who hates croissant dough, right? And I made that croissant dough from scratch, and I used most of it in the pot pies the other day, but I had these cuttings left over, and I just threw them in the freezer, and the other day I took them out, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna put chocolate in this, and I'm gonna put it in the oven, it's gonna be great, and then I did, and it was so good. And so yeah, and I'm just doing random stuff like that because of all the other stuff that got built. I can do all these other little things, and it's easy, right? Like, or it's easier now because all that foundational framework stuff went into it. And I know I talked a lot about the dough that I got to make over the holidays. That was awesome. But the larger implications of the foundational framework of the dough access have yet to be fully explored. So I've been going through doing that slowly. The phyllo and the pastry dough have been the easiest accessible. We're setting brioche as a higher tiered goal. Very stoked about the first brioche occasion. That'll be fun. We did naan last night. I told you things just continue to shine in the kitchen of my heart. We are running out of food, and I am absolutely staunchly opposed to purchasing any more food with my own money. So waiting until the 7th when the stamps come in. Thank you, SNAP program, feeding so many people. Everybody deserves to be fed. That is just an easy, universal, basic income level style of human right we could guarantee for every person on this earth with relative ease, with the careful, intentional, thoughtful redistribution of local resources. However, I really want to see all the people involved in that process. Which brings us back to media literacy campaigns and my kitchen. So, naan, right? Very stoked. Got to do naan. Mainly because of running out of food. Yep, thank you, SNAP program, right? So, what's left as far as like some kind of meat, quote, quote, I use meat, beans, and tofu all interchangeably in my head as like a protein thing. Because there just needs to be that much variety in my diet. I can only have meat like once or twice a week, otherwise that's just too much, man. Like, it's way. But yeah, so I'm like, okay, we're out of all this food. What's next? And so we made some beans and we made some rice, and I was like, this is so perfect. We'll just make beans and rice. Oh my god, they'll feed us all week. And then we won't have to think about food. Like, we just won't have to think about it. And you can put any sauce on that, and it becomes like saucy, bold flavor. And you can add any veg to that, and it becomes saucy, bold veg, accentuated flavor town thing, right? And then, oh my gosh, and then I was like, and we just accessed all this bread capacity, so we should add one of the breads. Obviously, it's gonna be naan. And so, I made naan from scratch last night, and it was so good. I fucked up a little bit in the recipe, and in doing so, I realized that the person who had initially written the recipe had kind of elongated certain processes and made them more of like a step-by-step than they actually needed to be. And so I found a corner that I could cut, or that I felt like I could reasonably cut, and that's the best part.